Okay, good afternoon from Beijing. As introduced, I'm a professor here in the School of International Studies and South-South Cooperation. Let me begin by congratulating the China-Africa Review for hosting this. Actually, this is the first webinar I attended that specifies BRI as a topic, and that's proposed by an African entity. This is also a good opportunity for me to self-congratulate a little bit, if I may, on behalf of Peking University. Madam Li Ke is, I see her on the screen. Over the past, I believe, 4 years, Peking University had organized a Dongfang scholarship program whereby we bring in senior mid-rank officers from around the world, including Africa. I understand several of our participants on the webinar today were our alumni of the Dongfang Scholarship Program. Before I go to the slides, I have a few slides later on. Let me also observe that it really is a miracle for us, although I've never been to your wonderful country, Rwanda. It's really a miracle for us, observing from afar how thorough the transformation Rwanda has come through over the past 20+ years. When I was a college graduate, we used to watch on TV about civil strife and other problems in that country. But over the past decades, 2 decades, Rwanda has seriously transformed itself. Your growth, your stability is a major part of the African Renaissance that our writers talk about. And I also noticed that the Rwandan government was the first to sign an e-commerce cooperation agreement with the Chinese company Alibaba to tap into the World Trade Program. And this is a major marker of success, and it's also an indication of foresight in terms of, another developing country cashing in on the fast developing digital economy. I understand I have, no, wait. Can you allow me to share my screen? I think I clicked, it said I'm not allowed to share the screen.
You can share the screen, Professor, no problem. You can share the screen.
No, it says not. Let me try again. No, I think somebody has to work on the system a little bit.
Oh, let me see whether the technical team can do it.
Okay. Well, maybe, how do we do that? Okay, now we're in front of the computer. That's easier to handle.
Right, yeah, it's now visible.
Oh, now it's visible. Yes. That's good. Okay. I was asked to talk about the Belt and Road Initiative, and rather than saying how important it is, I think, as I put in the subtitle, this is an opportunity for Sino-African connectivity. It's something we need to both work on. And you also noticed in the main title, I did not put in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Belt and Road as an idea was proposed by China, that's all right, but it needs to be broadly accepted for it to, for the rationale to work. And that's, I guess, we're accepted. Now, as well, in the introduction that was mentioned, lots of things have been said about the Belt and Road. The program is about 10 years old. There is also the new Global Development Initiative. So what we are seeing is that people understandably, either with or without biases, or with or without more understanding, they have their own opinions. I'm not going to go through each of these here. As the ambassador mentioned, China now emphasizes both a high quality Belt and Road, and also more recently, there is the Global Development Initiative. I would encourage you later on to click on the links I provide here and go through the Chinese language documents. Most of them are from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in English, and to have a thorough, should I say, a more factual understanding of government positions. And the first link on the website, Idailu, it actually comes in 6 different languages, including English, Arabic, Spanish, or whatnot. It is a good collection of the programs and actual projects under the initiative. I myself did a quick check. There were, I believe, up to 15 references to Rwanda in the titles of these reports. So you may want to get an idea about the operational sites there. Now, how do I go to the next page? Someone else is controlling this. Okay, next page. Now, the initiative, certainly it was formally announced by the Chinese president, but the nature of this, for me as a scholar, is one of international development, which is defined to be the governments of higher income countries providing official international support for economic development of poorer countries through bilateral and multilateral channels. Now, as we always say in textbooks, governments don't trade, governments support the trade. In the end, it will be the companies, the individuals that take advantage of the opportunities governments provide. Now, the idea of the initiative is very Chinese, and it actually goes back to Dr. Sun Yat-sen, should we say. His book on the international development of China in 1920 actually offered many of the false insights that our leaders today, and certainly we as scholars in China, subscribe to. I just put in the chat box of our webinar an English language representation of Dr. Sun's writing on that subject. It's very different from that of international development using the same vocabulary out of European and North American experiences. This is not an extension of colonialism. If anything, back in 1920, China was being colonized. Nor is this meant to be charity or generosity. Rather, it focuses on taking advantage of available opportunities to grow yourself. So the ideas of what we call today a community with a shared future actually resonates quite well with the overarching rationale in Dr. Sun's proposal, appeal, should we say, that all are equal, 天下大同. In other words, this is, we really reject, in terms of the founding stone of Chinese thinking rejects a hierarchy. This is the partnership. And then those are the ideas, but then the initiative, as I see it, is also based on China's own experience in utilizing international development support. But many countries did that. If you look at studies, how and why China received World Bank, for example, loans, but would become more successful than others. There are certain essential elements here. One is that when there was an international support project, China provided matching funds for the aided projects. It was not just waiting for someone else to do a project in our territory. And secondly, we had an all-of-government approach to support this aid project. To make the administration, we created one window entities to administer this support. And then China took on the sovereign responsibility in debt servicing. So certainly, you know, with banks are banks, however they are called, the regional development banks, or World Bank, or policy bank, whatever bank, you need to repay to continue to get the loan. So next page, please. So can someone move this down? I cannot control it. Just to give you an idea, this came from the World Bank document that gives summarizes foreign economic support to China through the World Bank, how we spent up to 2003. Actually, the data is good up to 2003. If you look how we spent the World Bank money on transport, energy and mining, rural development, urban development, those were the major sectors. And certainly there were education, So in other words, what we propose from the in the Belt and Road, very much based on how we spent international support. But more interestingly, on the right-hand side of the screen, you will see that the majority of the flow of capital into China, more than 1%, that's the top line, right, is actually a private capital, foreign direct investment. In terms of official development assistance, ODA, or the loans from the World Bank, those that were fairly low, less than 1%. But the loans from the World Bank, from these multilateral institutions, was extremely important because the continuation of those loans was a vote of confidence, institutional confidence, to help enable the inflow of private capital into China. And we hope this can happen in other countries as well. So the Belt and Road, as I said, grew out of our own experience. That's one thing I wanted to share. Next page, please. Now, China's trajectory of growth in many ways is a part of the East Asian growth paradigm. And on the right-hand side, you probably will see, you have Japan was the one that came up with the idea of a flying geese. It talked about the time continuing in the country. So the same product gets to be made in different countries at the passage of time. Of course, Japan itself moved on to more advanced products, but with clothing, for example, in the beginning was made in Japan, later on was made in other countries. So what was called a flying geese. In some ways, the criticism of Belt and Road is similar to the criticism of the so-called flying geese. China was an active part of the flying geese pattern, but today probably in some sectors, China is in more of a leading position. But nevertheless, it's not just the transfer of projects. It's not just the transfer of technology. It's several things. One is emphasis on domestic savings. You need the cash. You cannot just always rely on foreign support. Secondly, investment in education, technical and vocational training. Earlier, the ambassador mentioned China has trained a certain number of technicians in Rwanda and other African countries. This is far more important than the transfer of capital in investment, because in the end, you will need your workers on the ground to be able to do the job. Then the import of foreign technology and, if necessary, raw materials on that basis goes to industrialization. Here, I heard earlier on the comment in the introduction that you thought the Belt and Road was about mega projects. But that's not true. That's not necessarily true. It's really about inviting a participating country. The ambassador mentioned some 140 countries signed on to this, inviting them to work with us here in China to fit, new countries into new economies into the international hierarchy. Should I say, well, it's a hierarchy in reality, but it's the international supply chains, right? And if necessary, if you don't really have the cash, you can practice counter trade, right? For your different forms of compensation trade in export. A resource for finance is a part of this. Actually, I just double checked. As of 1990, actually, some 40% of Chinese export earnings actually came from exporting raw materials. In exchange, we imported technology, we imported railroads from Japan, port construction, and if you anyone of you have ever been to Hainan, the entire ring road, the highway of Hainan came through World Bank loans. So resource for finance is not new to us. We were on the providing end of resources. But in the end, all this goes through, if you look at this simple summary of strategies, and then you will be able to export consumer products that fit the need of other markets. But throughout all this, there will still be gaps. But then the industrial policy of the country is to promote competition in the niche markets, the niche products. If anything, earlier we mentioned I mentioned e-commerce. If you look at the electronic vehicles, the EV sector in China, that's a niche market. Chinese companies cannot hope to compete and succeed against established international automobile companies, fossil fuel companies, automobiles, because they are established for some 200 years. We cannot possibly compete, but then we can compete in the niche market in electric vehicles. Similar logic applies when we encourage thinking in countries like Rwanda and other African countries, when we think about government policy to affect industry growth. Next page, please. So the Belt and Road, as the ambassador summarized in more thorough language, involves policy coordination, infrastructure, trade, finance, people to people. But if there is a contribution the Belt and Road Initiative makes to this basket of ideas, in a sort of Easter egg basket, it's that we really are making this an open-ended invitation. It's a collaborative project, but then the essential pursuit here under the Belt and Road is to treat a low and middle income country, see that as a potential growth in consumption. And this is very important. It's not a burden. It's not just an opportunity to take advantage of in terms of resources. These markets, very much like China's transformation over the past 40 years, can become transform themselves from being net exporters of resources to being importers of finished products. Other matters like tariffs, corporate incentives, interest rates, they matter as well, please. But the essential difference is to say, well, let's try to be farsighted. The economy may be lower in income at now, but there is an opportunity for that economy to grow up and become a major consumer of your own product, of course, as well. Next page, please. Now, I would encourage you to read these documents whereby the links I provided at the top, e-commerce, how important it is within your country, not just in terms of trading with China. These are photos of what's happening in the Chinese countryside, especially on the right-hand side. You don't always need to involve high tech. So long as you have an iPhone, you tap into the e-commerce network. You can still be with the family, raise the family. You don't have to migrate, but you can still make use of local inputs and earn an income. That's, these pictures are quite well done. Next page, please. Next page, yeah. And these are hilarious pages. On the left-hand side, you probably don't read the Chinese. It's basically Hema Cun. Hema is a shop run by Alibaba. It basically says, a green organic product grown in Africa through the e-commerce channels can be sold here in China. Actually, I was reading the South China Morning Post the other day. Now you have avocados being exported en masse to China from Kenya, right? Now the right-hand side is, was it Rwanda? I forgot the nationality of this particular, I think it was even Rwanda, ambassador to China, took advantage of, the TikTok network and started to sell coffee. I read somewhere he was able to sell the same amount of coffee within 5 minutes as there was trade the previous year. There are lots of opportunities without thinking small, thinking relating to the individuals on the ground, including residents in the countryside. Next page, please. And this is the last page. So how all this comes together, you hear from Chinese officials, you hear from scholars. My job here is that, and also you hear from critics and skeptics from other societies. Then that was the Rwanda of, okay, someone told me that was indeed the ambassador of Rwanda, Mr. James. But then here, there is a way we can put the Chinese narrative in a coherent way. Underlying all this Belt and Road or Chinese foreign policy in general, especially that under FOCAC and other forums, is we value interdependence. This interdependence is underpinned by security, peace, development, ecology. Those are the four essential points. And actually the Chinese government's notion of holistic view of security encompasses, traditional national security, pursuit of peace, development, and protection of ecology. On that basis, we emphasize sovereign equality. Again, going back to Dr. Sen, it's not just recent years. And there are differences, of course. We need to learn and from each other that in terms of civilizational differences, we encourage dialogue. We work through multilateral mechanisms, and that's what we mean by win-win. You have been very generous to me without interrupting me. I think I've exhausted my time of 10 minutes. But so in any case, if you want me to summarize, the Belt and Road as an idea, like I said, is an invitation. It's a call for collaboration, and much of this will, in terms of future projects, will depend on how a participating entity, beginning with the government, going down to a corporation, and then there are individuals interact with us, and the quality of interaction is as important as the final, let's say, a final product of the what we call cooperation. So on that note, thank you very much. If we probably later on, if we in the discussion, we can continue the Q&A session. Thank you very much.